to Sunday School. I'm Ella Robert Wilson. Thank you once again for allowing Sunday School to be part of your regular schedule. Our subject today is Solomon judges with wisdom and justice. We'll be looking at 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28, and then 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 8. Now, our Bible truth says, using God's wisdom is the only way to make good decisions. So we can't think of ourselves as being so smart that we come up with all these ideas and all these good decisions. All good decisions come from God and come through His wisdom. Now, when we look at our lesson today, starting in verse 16, and it says, "Then came there two women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house." So we have this story of this Sunday school lesson starting with two women. Now, both of these women were harlots, or some people say prostitutes. So we have two prostitutes, two babies, and the king. So these two women, despite their occupation, they felt at ease to bring their child or their situation to the king. Now, prostitution had never been or been looked at as a good occupation. It wasn't the standard of life that God was looking for in people, but it was lawful. It was lawful at the time. Now, these two harlots were accepted by Israel king, and he gave them his undivided attention. He gave them his full attention in their situation. So what is this saying to us? It tells us that no matter what a person looks like, no matter what a person's occupation or background is, that everybody deserves fair treatment and just treatment. So everybody deserves fair treatment no matter what kind of background or occupation that they have. This is the way God wants us to be when we're dealing with other people. So the first lady made it clear to Solomon what he had to do. And that was, he was going to have to decide who was right after hearing the first lady claim and hearing the second lady claim. So Solomon's job was to decide who was going to be right. So it goes on to say in verse 18, "And it came to pass," now this is the first lady talking. "So it came to pass the third day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also. And we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it." So the first lady began to talk, and she began to tell the king the situation as she saw it. So she said that it was the third day, and both had given birth. Now, the first lady claimed that they was in the house together. There was nobody else around. So she was building the case that couldn't nobody have taken her child but the other lady. So she go on and she says that the other lady, baby, died through the night because she had overlaid it, meaning that she had turned over and rolled over on the baby and perhaps smothered the baby. So, of course, there are no witnesses, just going to be one lady word against the other lady word. So this first lady began to make these accusations against the second lady. So in verse 20, it says, this still the first lady talking. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while thy handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. So she was giving her, this first lady, she was giving her whole story of how she lost her baby, or how the other lady took the baby. So the first woman began to lay all the blame on the other lady. She accused her of killing her own baby through the night, and then coming into her room during the middle of the night while she slept, and her handmaid, her helper, both of them were asleep. So this other woman supposedly had killed her baby, went into her room, to this other lady's room, took her baby from her, and laid her dead baby beside the lady that was asleep. So she got up the next morning. She said she really didn't notice anything, or really didn't realize what had really happened till she got up the next morning to feed her baby. And that's when she realized that this was not the baby that she had bared. So we see this situation that Solomon has got to go through, where he's got to decide. This was going to be a tough decision because nobody else was there. They didn't have anybody else to give them another side of the story. So when we get to verse 22, it says, and the other woman says, nay, but the living son is mine. That's my son. And the dead is thy son. And this said, no, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. So both ladies tried to get their side of the story in to King Solomon. So here we have this situation. 2 prostitutes, 2 babies, and a king. And a decision has to be made. Now, the decision has to be the right decision because this involved child custody. And the king wanted to give the baby to the right mother. So this was going to take some wisdom. So in verse 23, the king spoke to him. Then said the king, the one said, this is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other said, no, or nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. So this was the situation. One say this, the other say that, and they both claim that this living child is theirs. So this is when the wisdom of God kicked in to Solomon. This shows that Solomon was operating in God's wisdom. God gave him what to do. So in verse 24, the king said, bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other. Now, what a horrible scene that was about to take place. We have two women and this baby. And what was about to happen, this baby was about to be executed. So King Solomon says, so since you say this is your baby and this is your baby, the best thing that I can do is to divide the baby. So he ordered those that were with him, the attendants that were with him, to bring him a sword. And one of the attendants held one of the legs up of the baby, and the other one held the other leg. And there was perhaps a third person with the sword that was going to come and slice the baby straight down the middle. So he gave him this second order. He said, so when you do this, give half the baby to this lady and give the other half to the other lady. So this was the wisdom of God. And this wisdom that God gave Solomon at this time was going to help him determine who the real mother was. In verse 26, then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king. For her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, let it be neither mine nor thine, but divided. The love of a mother. God has put a special love for inside a woman for mankind. The love of a mother for her child. A mother would do anything for her child. She don't want that child to suffer. She would do without. She would take the blame for that child. And this situation right here, especially when it was coming to the execution of this child, this was too much for her to bear, because she loved this child so much that she didn't want to see this. So she would rather give this child up than to see it do any harm come to it. So she said to the king, she said, look, she said, then the king answered and said, give her the living child. By her statement, it was proven to the king that this was her child. And by the statement of the other lady, she said, let it be so. Go ahead, don't let it be my child or be her child. You know, sometimes when bad things fall upon people, they want that to be shared with everybody. They want something bad to happen to somebody else just because it happened to them. And that's a selfish motive. So through her statement, through this first lady's statement, the king knew that it wasn't her child because she didn't have any feelings for it. So she said, let it be so. Go ahead and divide the child. So she didn't care enough for it that the child stayed alive. So the king answered and said, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. Now, judgment like this or wisdom like this in this kind of case will not go unnoticed. In verse 28 it said, and all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, meaning that they respected the king for the judgment and the wisdom that he showed in this situation. Not only did they respect him, they also gave God glory in this situation. Because they said, and they saw that the wisdom of God was in him. They knew that to solve this type of situation, that this wisdom had to come from God. So God should get praise for all wisdom. Wisdom is more than just book knowledge. Wisdom involves knowing what to do and then doing it. There's a lot of people that know what to do, but they don't do it. But wisdom requires us to do both. Know what to do and to do it. So true wisdom comes from God. So this was something that young Solomon lacked. But he asked God, and God gave it to him. Now the Bible tells us that if any man lack wisdom, then he can ask God for it, and God will give it to him. Because true wisdom comes from God. Now in many points of our life, we're going to be challenged to make very crucial decisions. Some may even be considered life or death decisions. So when those things come up, if we are wise, we will ask God for help.